Most people think investing fails because they picked the wrong asset, but the deeper issue is rarely discussed. I've watched disciplined people invest for years, yet never ask what they truly want their money to do. This video is not about hype or prediction, but about the quiet choices shaping your future financial life. Before we begin, if you value calm money talk, please like this video so more people can find it. Drop a comment with your biggest investing confusion. Share this with a friend, and subscribe for new videos weekly. Now picture investing just $10 every day, consistently, even when life is busy or the market feels noisy. $10 seems trivial, but repeated for decades, it becomes a lever that can move an entire retirement plan. The real decision is not the amount, but the direction you point that money while time multiplies it. You can be disciplined for 30 years and still regret the outcome if your intention was never clearly defined. Most people don't realize a choice is being made each time they invest, even if they never say it aloud. That choice is about behavior, whether your money stays inside working or comes back to you as cash. Once money is invested, it really only does those two things, no matter how fancy the strategy sounds. When money stays inside, businesses use it to expand, improve, and build value that quietly raises share prices. Nothing shows up in your account today, which is why growth can feel slow, invisible, and emotionally uncomfortable. When money comes back out, you receive dividends you can spend, save, or reinvest, and it feels reassuring now. Here is the trade-off. Every dollar you pull forward is a dollar that stops compounding inside the system. Money cannot be in two places at once, and that simple constraint explains most long-term portfolio differences. Growth investing is simply choosing to let more money remain fully at work, prioritizing future size over today's cash. Dividend investing emphasizes cash flow, asking the portfolio to pay you along the way, even if the pile grows slower. When you see these as behaviors, not identities, you can stop picking sides and start tuning a personal balance. People often treat growth and dividend investing like opposing teams, but in reality, they simply guide money differently over time. You are not choosing who you are as an investor, you are choosing what job each dollar performs while time passes. Growth investing asks money to stay patient, remain quiet, and focus entirely on becoming something larger later. Dividend investing asks money to become useful sooner, transforming future value into cash you can actually touch. Neither approach is morally better, smarter, or safer. They simply serve different human needs at different moments. Problems arise when people adopt a label without understanding the long-term consequences attached to that behavior. Many investors say they want growth, but emotionally crave reassurance, creating tension they never properly resolve. Others chase income early, then feel disappointed when their portfolio never grows large enough to feel secure. This confusion happens because labels hide the real mechanism quietly working underneath every investment decision. At its core, investing is less about intelligence and more about aligning money behavior with personal priorities. This is where exchange-traded funds often get misunderstood and mistakenly treated like complete strategies. An ETF is not a plan or a promise. It is simply a container holding companies with shared characteristics. What matters is how those companies use their profits once the money enters the business ecosystem. Some companies reinvest nearly everything internally, pushing expansion, innovation, and efficiency year after year. Other companies intentionally return a portion of profits back to shareholders as predictable, recurring cash. ETFs inherit this behavior automatically, not by magic, but by reflecting what the underlying businesses actually do. That means ETFs do not create outcomes. They amplify the direction your priorities already point toward. Understanding this removes much of the mystery and fear surrounding growth versus dividend investing debates. Instead of asking which ETF is better, the smarter question becomes what behavior you want encouraged. Once you focus on behavior, investing starts to feel less like gambling and more like intentional long-term design. This shift in thinking changes everything because behavior determines outcomes far more consistently than predictions or market timing ever could. When people argue about returns, they often ignore the quiet structural forces shaping those returns year after year. One of the most helpful ways I think about portfolios is not as plans, but as systems with adjustable settings. Instead of imagining a switch you flip once, picture a dial you can slowly turn as life changes. That dial controls how much of your money stays inside working versus how much flows back to you. Turning the dial toward growth keeps more capital compounding quietly, often without much visible feedback along the way. Turning the dial toward income pulls value forward, creating cash flow you can use, see, and emotionally feel. The key insight is that this dial is never permanently locked unless you choose to ignore it. Many regrets in investing come not from bad decisions, but from good decisions left untouched for decades. Life changes your needs over time, and your portfolio should be allowed to adapt alongside those changes. Early on, growth often matters more because time is abundant and immediate cash flow is rarely essential. Later in life, income can become more valuable as flexibility, stability, and reduced stress take priority. Neither phase is superior. They simply reflect different moments with different emotional and financial requirements. The mistake is assuming the same allocation should serve you equally well across every stage of life. A well-designed portfolio acknowledges change and builds adaptability directly into its structure from the beginning. Quo. This is why I prefer thinking in terms of one adjustable portfolio instead of multiple disconnected strategies. The tools do not change, only the emphasis placed on each behavior inside the same framework. Growth-oriented ETFs and income-oriented ETFs can coexist without conflict when their roles are clearly defined. Each group contributes something different, and neither needs to dominate completely for the system to function well. Once this balance is understood, investing becomes calmer, more deliberate, and far easier to stick with long-term. To see how this works, imagine the same portfolio gently adjusted toward growth rather than immediate income needs. In that position, most money stays inside businesses, quietly compounding while patience replaces excitement over long periods of time. Returns show up slowly through rising prices, not frequent payments, which can feel unrewarding at first to many people. Growth-tilted portfolios often test emotional discipline because progress is real but rarely visible day-to-day investors. Despite that discomfort, keeping money working internally allows compounding to accelerate quietly over decades of long investment horizons. Now imagine turning the same dial the other direction, prioritizing income instead of maximum future size for your life. In this position, cash begins flowing back regularly, creating reassurance and flexibility that many people value during uncertain times. Income-focused portfolios trade speed for consistency, delivering visible progress without relying solely on rising prices over long periods. That steady cash can be reinvested, saved, or spent, making the portfolio feel active and supportive during life transitions. However, because money leaves the system sooner, long-term growth naturally slows compared to growth-heavy setups over time. D3. Neither outcome is a surprise once you understand how behavior shapes results more than labels ever could alone. This is why comparing strategies without context often creates confusion instead of clarity for new investors everywhere today. The same portfolio can feel wildly different depending on which behavior is given more weight at any moment. Understanding this flexibility removes pressure, because you are not committing your future to one permanent choice forever unnecessarily. Instead, you are designing a system that can respond as your priorities, age, and circumstances evolve gradually over time. This approach encourages patience, reduces anxiety, and helps investors stay consistent through unpredictable market cycles and emotions alike. Consistency matters more than cleverness, because steady behavior compounds regardless of headlines or short-term noise everywhere today. When you align behavior with needs, investing stops feeling like constant stress and starts feeling supportive and intentional. This alignment is what ultimately determines whether your portfolio feels empowering or quietly frustrating over time long-term. With that foundation clear, we can now look at real numbers without losing sight of what they represent. Numbers matter, but only when you understand the behavior creating them. Otherwise, they mislead more than they inform. To keep this fair, imagine the same daily investment, the same timeline, and the same set of ETFs. The only variable we change is how the portfolio dial is set between growth and income emphasis. This removes guesswork and focuses attention on behavior rather than personality, opinions, or short-term market narratives. Start with a portfolio tilted heavily toward growth, where most capital remains inside compounding year after year. In this setup, dividends exist but play a supporting role, never interrupting the primary growth engine significantly. The experience feels quiet, sometimes boring, because little cash arrives to signal progress during early years. Yet beneath that silence, compounding accelerates as retained earnings continually build future earning power over time. This is how portfolios grow large, not through excitement, but through long periods of sustained internal reinvestment. Now contrast that with the same portfolio adjusted toward income instead of maximum long-term size. Here, dividend-oriented assets take priority, intentionally sending cash back on a predictable and visible schedule. That cash flow creates a sense of momentum, even when market prices move slowly or sideways. Income feels reassuring because something tangible happens regularly, reinforcing confidence during uncertain or stressful periods. The trade-off is clear, because money paid out cannot continue compounding inside businesses at the same pace. Growth still exists, but it becomes a secondary goal rather than the dominant force shaping outcomes. These differences are not flaws. They are intentional design choices reflecting different definitions of financial success. One definition prioritizes the largest possible future value, even if the journey feels emotionally quiet. The other prioritizes usable cash flow, even if that means a smaller total portfolio decades later. Neither approach is wrong, but each leads to a very different experience over 30 years. With that context, the long-term results begin to make sense without feeling surprising or confusing. Let's put real time behind this by assuming a simple habit of investing $10 every single day. There is no lump sum, no timing advantage, and no attempt to predict markets or economic cycles. This setup mirrors how real people invest, slowly, consistently, and imperfectly across many years of normal life. In the first year, the numbers feel unimpressive, because discipline rarely delivers emotional rewards early on. After several years, however, the difference between behaviors begins separating quietly beneath the surface. With a growth-tilted portfolio, most value accumulation comes from rising prices rather than cash distributions. Each retained dollar builds on the previous one, allowing compounding to stack faster as time extends forward. By the 10-year mark, the portfolio feels substantial, even though very little income has been received. What you own is not convenience yet, but potential that continues expanding as patience remains intact. This path rewards those willing to tolerate long stretches where progress feels abstract rather than immediately useful. Now consider the same timeline with the dial turned toward income from the very beginning. Early years feel more encouraging because cash arrives regularly, validating the effort with visible reinforcement. Dividends can be reinvested or used, offering flexibility that many investors deeply appreciate during life changes. Over time, however, growth slows slightly as money is repeatedly redirected away from internal compounding. The portfolio still grows, but its shape changes, prioritizing reliability over maximum acceleration. These differences compound quietly, year after year, even though daily contributions remain exactly the same. Behavior, not effort, becomes the defining factor separating eventual outcomes across identical starting conditions. By 20 years, the gap in total value begins to feel meaningful, not theoretical or academic anymore. One path produces a larger pile, while the other produces a steadily increasing stream of usable cash. At this stage, priorities become impossible to ignore, because the portfolio reflects your earlier intentions clearly. By 30 years, the difference between these two behaviors becomes impossible to dismiss or explain away emotionally. The growth-tilted portfolio ends up much larger because most money was allowed to remain inside compounding continuously. Nearly all of its final value comes from price appreciation rather than cash being pulled forward earlier. Income exists, but it remains modest because the system was never designed to prioritize payments along the way. This outcome rewards patience, delayed gratification, and a willingness to wait quietly while value builds invisibly. But the income-tilted portfolio tells a very different story after the same 30-year contribution period. Its total value is smaller because a significant portion of returns arrived earlier as cash distributions. That cash was reinvested or used, shaping a portfolio focused on reliability rather than maximum future size. What stands out most is the income itself, which becomes large enough to meaningfully support real-life expenses. Monthly dividends feel tangible, useful, and psychologically stabilizing in ways rising prices often do not. Both outcomes came from the same daily habit, the same effort, and the same underlying investment tools. The only thing that changed was how much emphasis was placed on keeping money inside versus pulling it forward. This is why debates about growth versus dividends often miss the point entirely. They focus on winning arguments instead of helping people design lives that actually feel secure and intentional. Wealth is not just about the largest number on a statement, but about what that money allows you to do. For some people, maximum future value matters most because income is still years away from being needed. For others, dependable cash flow brings freedom, flexibility, and reduced stress much sooner. Neither preference is superior. They simply reflect different definitions of what financial success means personally. The mistake is assuming one definition should apply universally to everyone at every stage of life. Once you see this, investing becomes less about right answers and more about honest self-assessment. When you stop copying other people's strategies, you create space to build something that actually fits your own life. This is where many investors feel relief, because permission replaces pressure and clarity replaces constant second-guessing. You no longer need to chase what sounds impressive, only what quietly supports the future you want to live. The portfolio dial becomes a practical tool, not a philosophical debate about which approach sounds smarter online. As your life changes, the dial can move, slowly adjusting without destroying everything you already built. That flexibility is what keeps people invested through uncertainty, volatility, and long stretches of emotional discomfort. Markets will change, headlines will scare you, and opinions will constantly conflict with each other loudly. A clear behavioral framework acts like an anchor, keeping decisions grounded when emotions try pulling you off course. This is why understanding behavior matters more than memorizing tickers, yields, or short-term performance tables. Tools come and go, but behavior quietly compounds or erodes results regardless of market conditions. Once this framework is internalized, future decisions become simpler, calmer, and far less emotionally draining. Instead of reacting, you respond, because you understand what role each dollar is meant to play. Growth no longer feels reckless, and income no longer feels limiting, because both serve clear purposes. You stop asking which strategy is better, and start asking which behavior fits your current stage. That single shift prevents years of unnecessary regret, anxiety, and endless comparison with others. It also makes consistency easier, because your portfolio finally aligns with how you actually live and think. Consistency, more than intelligence, is what allows small daily actions to transform into meaningful long-term outcomes. $10 a day matters only when it is pointed in a direction you truly understand and accept. Without that understanding, even perfect discipline can quietly build a future you never intended. With clarity, however, simple habits gain power, purpose, and a sense of quiet confidence over time. This is why I encourage people to slow down and think before adjusting their portfolio, not after disappointment sets in. Money is a powerful tool, but only when it is directed intentionally instead of being left on autopilot forever. Autopilot feels safe at first, yet it often hides important decisions until the consequences are already locked in. Taking time to reflect now can prevent decades of silent frustration later, even if everything looked fine on paper. The goal is not to predict the future, but to design flexibility into your financial life from the beginning. DD. Flexibility allows you to respond to opportunities, challenges, and personal changes without panic or drastic overcorrection. A well-designed portfolio should support your life, not force your life to conform to rigid financial rules. When money works this way, It becomes a source of stability rather than a constant source of stress. Growth and income stop competing once you see them as complementary tools instead of opposing philosophies. Together, they create a system that can evolve as your priorities shift over time naturally. The earlier you understand this relationship, the more options you preserve for your future self. Options create freedom, and freedom is often what people truly mean when they talk about wanting wealth. Wealth is less about accumulation alone, and more about having choices when life inevitably changes direction. Those choices are built slowly, through small decisions repeated consistently over long periods of time. No single ETF determines that outcome, but the behavior you encourage absolutely does. This perspective removes urgency, because you realize there is no perfect answer waiting to be discovered. There is only alignment between what you value now and what you want to preserve for later. Once alignment exists, investing becomes quieter, steadier, and far easier to maintain emotionally. You stop chasing reassurance and start trusting a system you deliberately designed yourself. If this way of thinking about money feels different, it is because clarity is quieter than hype most of the time. I hope this video helped you step back and see investing less as competition and more as personal design. There is no single right answer here, only honest trade-offs that deserve to be chosen consciously over time. Growth and income are not enemies. They are complementary tools that work best when their roles are understood clearly. The most important step is realizing you are allowed to adjust as your life priorities slowly change over time. When pressure fades, investing stops feeling urgent and starts feeling like a supportive system you can trust long-term. Buona Morini. If this perspective reduced confusion for you, gently tap like so others can find calmer money conversations too. I would love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment sharing where you would turn your portfolio dial today. Reading those comments helps me shape future videos around the real questions people rarely ask out loud themselves. If you want more content that treats money calmly, consider subscribing to keep learning without constant stress online today. New videos will continue building this framework, helping you think long-term while avoiding unnecessary financial anxiety consistently over time. Remember, investing is not about perfection, but about staying intentional, flexible, and honest with yourself over long periods. Small daily habits gain real power only when they align with values you truly believe in long-term. When money supports your life instead of controlling it, progress feels steadier and far more sustainable over time. You do not need to rush decisions, because thoughtful direction matters far more than speed early on in life. Take time to reflect on what you want money to do before asking how fast it grows for you. Theo. That reflection alone can change outcomes more than switching funds or chasing new strategies ever could long-term. Long-term success often looks boring externally, but feels calm, confident, and deeply reassuring internally over time ahead. Thank you for spending this time with me and thinking carefully about your financial direction today together here. I appreciate your attention, curiosity, and willingness to question common assumptions about money and success honestly over time. Until next time, keep your approach simple, flexible, and aligned with the life you genuinely want to build steadily. Parindoi.